hello there. I'm Haslinda. I'm an anchor of Bloomberg Television. There is a funding frenzy in Asia. Global investors are rushing in to make a bet on Asian tech startups as the pandemic has accelerated digital adoption. Southeast Asia will have 350 million digital consumers by year's end. India already has 500 million and it's working on the next 500 million. Let's talk tech. Sheila Patel is Vice Chair of B Capital, VC founded by Facebook's Oct.07 Sheila, good to have you with us.
Great to see you again, Haslinda.
It's been a while. You know, Sheila, the last two decades have been about consumer internet. The next 2 decades will be about digital transformation of traditional industries. Where are you seeing the biggest opportunities in Asia in the year ahead?
Well, I think the opportunities in Asia are just spectacular, and it's certainly a focus. It's been very exciting for me to make the shift into venture, and particularly, as you mentioned, with B Capital after years in large-scale asset management. And as we look at technology in Asia, I think what you're seeing is what you mentioned at the header, the digitization of huge portions of the population. In 2010, only 2% of Indians had a mobile phone. Today, as you mentioned, over 500 million. But what does that mean? Particularly pandemic-driven activity has just been amazing. So people are shopping online. They're using their phones for finance. Fintech is having an explosion in Asia. And what we see in Southeast Asia and Indonesia and India is innovative new companies that are coming up with new ways for people to use these tools. When you think about comparing East and West, or whatever comparison or buckets we want to make between emerging and developing markets and what we call the developed markets, when it comes to technology, I'm not sure those monikers actually fit, because some of the most interesting developments in technology are actually coming from places like China, India, Indonesia, Southeast Asia.
That's right. I mean, we hear people say that when it comes to fintech innovation, Asia surpasses that of the Valley. What innovation are you seeing in Asia that you're not seeing in the Valley?
Well, one interesting example is the all-inclusive nature of fintech that you see in Asia. So in many cases, someone is able to do multiple things with an app on their phone. In the US or in Europe, you've tended to see very tight verticals of development in some of these technologies. Something is checking and bill payment only. It doesn't also have savings. You can't also use it when you go in a grocery store. And so you have a proliferation of apps. Whereas what you've seen in Asia, in many cases, is a all-encompassing ecosystem that keeps the person in the business more, and it keeps the person solving their everyday problems with one company rather than several. But particularly, if you think about some of the things going on in Asia, we also see a boom in services for small and medium enterprise. In fact, in the last few weeks, we've had fundings for several companies in the space. And so Book is a really interesting accounting services company for small and medium enterprises in India. It had a funding round, Series C, that was very successful. There's also Aspire right in your hometown in Singapore, which is a neobank for small and medium enterprises and helps them with their banking needs and their financing needs. So there really is a proliferation of very interesting business verticals in Asia that we see continuing to grow.
When you talk about tech, you have to talk about China tech. I mean, it's been under tremendous scrutiny, tremendous clampdown. And I know that B Capital is looking to allocate as much as 40% of its $2 billion global fund to China. I mean, how are you looking at the clampdown? How are you assessing it? And what's still looking attractive?
Sure. Well, I think when it comes to China, let's hit the macro and then go to the micro. On the macro side, investors got a surprise. I don't know that some of us in the market in China would necessarily characterize it as a surprise. From many different perspectives, if you look around the world, regulators have gotten their hands very dirty on data for consumers and on privacy. And as you think about GDPR in Europe, as you think about some of the data discussions going on in the US and elsewhere, you see that governments are very interested in knowing how data for their citizens is used, captured, reused, recirculated, and frankly profited from. And so when you get to China, it's no surprise, I guess, in our eyes, that you see the same thing happen. Now, how regulators can act in China, the government's ability to act very quickly versus some of the signaling that investors are used to in other markets. This is where China is a different market and where it pays to have a lot of knowledge about what is going on and how people on the ground are thinking about some of these changes. For us, as we look at China, the place we see really relatively unexplored and about to boom is enterprise, is digitization for business, things that grease the wheels of commerce, so to speak, that make businesses have an easier time. So let's move away from the consumer and let's think about where is the next Salesforce? Where is the next Oracle? Where is the next great innovation from an enterprise perspective that could come out of China? And from our eyes, China is a place ripe for that with the number of businesses that have grown over the last decade, but the fact that they don't necessarily have the digital support that can make their businesses even more efficient and profitable.
I'm just wondering if you can be confident about the winners. Are they clear winners even now, or do you want to wait for greater clarity before deciding where or how to deploy your capital?
Yeah, look, I think it's such an interesting market right now, and you see it in everything you look at and every conversation you have. There is money flowing into this space at a pace that's kind of astonishing when you look at it in some ways. And so entrepreneurs that might have been previously starved for capital now may have a menu to choose from. For us, one of the things that helps us be selective, but also helps us be confident about the companies where we take on an investment and partner and look for them to grow is our partnership with BCG, which we think is very unique. So BCG, the global consultancy, has expertise in multiple sectors, has connectivity to some of the biggest companies in the world. And when we go in and look at a founder's ideas and business and how they look to grow, leaning into what we can bring them from that BCG perspective. Perhaps we can advise them on this sector and the ways it's been made more efficient in other countries and bring that BCG expertise to them and see them grow more rapidly because of that. In many cases, BCG's global network of large-scale multinational companies might tap into the expertise a company we've invested in has in a particular marketplace. So there's still value to be brought by the venture capitalists out there, by the investors out there. For us, BCG is a key part of that value add. And so we look holistically at where a company can go from a growth perspective, but we also think about how can we help them do it.
With China under scrutiny, is India looking even more attractive for VCs? I mean, it's a vibrant startup scene, more than 60 unicorns and counting.
Absolutely. So we see some major opportunities in India. We kicked off our discussion with the digitization there, and I think that can't be overstated. If you have 500 million people on their having a mobile phone, and mobile phones are getting cheaper and the service is getting cheaper as well, you not only have that base that's one of the biggest in the world, but according to App Annie and some other research on how Indians are using their phones, Indians are the top three users of their devices. And so that has opened a broad spectrum of areas where we can see activity. For example, online commerce, social e-commerce. Mishu is a company in India in which we've invested, which just did a new round. And they've seen their business skyrocket. Mainly it's because you're seeing Indians adopt that technology. But what do we see that's different? As we expand and grow and see these businesses burgeon in India, you're seeing Indians use their technology in a different way. There are massive cities to navigate. There are shops and small businesses that are using chains of value that are actually disruptive to value because it is so many middlemen for them to get to the next place. We're seeing India becoming a real harbinger of the disruption to come in how goods get to consumers and how they're able to access the most interesting products from their country or region in a very efficient way.
Is there reason to be concerned about regulations, about the government possibly turning back policies?
Look, I think in every market, we pay close attention to regulators and regulation. I think, again, some of the things that have come up in every market that you will see continue are how are you treating consumers? What data are you taking from them? Are you deviating from any norms? I think Fintech is actually a place where having that combination of innovation and thinking broadly about what financial services would make businesses better, not just individuals' lives, but again, the wheels of e-commerce work better is critical. But then thinking about what fits within the constraints of regulations, or in fact, what regulators might even welcome. And I think very much in spaces like Fintech, we haven't really talked about healthcare, but healthcare is a place where we see huge opportunity around the world and great ideas coming out of Asia. These are spaces where you have to think about the partnership and the vision of where a regulator sees a marketplace and make sure you're acting accordingly.
Earlier, I talked about how there's so much capital looking for all these investments, and that takes me to a question from the audience. Rob is asking, how do you hedge against overpaying in these growth markets or in these companies?
Well, it's tough markets to do that, right? I think it's gotten harder. Because you're seeing many new entrants, you're seeing many people that are deploying capital for the first time. We really take a step back. We try to make sure that we are picking companies and ideas and partnering with founders that we think not only have a grasp on the marketplace they're in today, but have the potential for a footprint beyond their current scope. That's a place we can really tap into BCG, where their perspective on how things have gone in other marketplaces, on where certain technologies might be able to have leverage. This is a place where we can evaluate a company and do that valuation, really thinking about where they go next as opposed to where they are now.
I'm interested in getting your thoughts on the consolidation trend. We had Grab acquiring Uber, we had Gojek and Tokopedia in Indonesia emerging, valuing that entity at more than $18 billion. Will consolidation be a theme? Will consolidation accelerate? Will we see more M&As in the next 1 to 2 years?
I do think you'll continue to see consolidation and acquisitions. There are a few different paths for this. Some of it is combinations of like businesses. That's no surprise. Again, for efficiencies, for their own resourcing, it makes sense for some of these businesses to combine. But importantly, and this is for us a place we lean heavily into our BCG connection, there are global players and large regional players that find it hard to foster innovation internally. We all know that. That's tough. It's hard to change things or come up with a great idea in your own house. But when you hear how somebody else does something, you're like, why didn't I think of that? Why didn't I come up with that idea? And so, I think you see many, many large companies, or at least larger companies, that have tried to fix certain things in the past, that have tried to innovate in telemedicine, but they're already a mega scale provider of services. They've tried to innovate in fintech, but they're already a big bank and they have a way they do things. And it's hard to make people envision a new way. I think you'll see acquisitions in these sectors that we're focused on, enterprise, fintech, healthcare, because large scale players need great ideas and they need them now. They have a choice between being disrupted by the ideas or adopting them, and acquisitions are a great way for them to bring those ideas in-house and, frankly, to leverage those ideas to scale. And leveraging ideas to scale is, again, to answer Rob's question again earlier, leveraging ideas to scale is another way that you can take these companies and bring them to a place where you're comfortable on a valuation perspective.
Are you encouraging companies that you invest in to consolidate? That's one. And two, is there risk perhaps that merged entities will lead to markets controlled by few powerful players? And that takes us back to China. I mean, China's trying to control the big tech because it's gone too big. It's monopolistic. So are we going to be in danger of that?
Look, I think at the moment, from a broad brush, tech is so fragmented and ideas, disruption, and innovation are coming from so many sources. I think it'll take a while before you see that concentration come through the acquisitions we see going on. You know, that said, we work closely with the companies in which we invest to think about whether acquisition is a path for them. It's not something we proactively seek out necessarily, but because we have this connectivity between the new scale space, the companies that are on the cutting edge of coming up with ideas, and the large scale companies that our partner BCG and we interact with every day, finding those moments when that partnership and that combination might make sense is a part of our DNA, and we'll keep thinking about that. Does that create a behemoth player? That would take a while, I think, in some of these spaces, but you never know. And certainly when it comes to China, I think we should be conscious, particularly for services for businesses and in areas like healthcare, that there could be the next great big idea that is large scale coming from that marketplace, however much it's been a place that's been disruptive or challenging for investors themselves of late.
Sheila Patel, B Capital, thank you so much for your time today. Been a pleasure.
It's great to see you again. Thanks so much.